After the mixed reception of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 3, director Sam Raimi got to work on a fourth Spider-Man movie, which would have introduced the main villains as Vulture and the Lizard, that would have aimed to win back fans that felt in the previous film that there was too many villains, there was the wasted potential of Venom, and what is now loved by meme culture but was considered cringeworthy at the time, Bully Maguire.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Superhero movies at the time in the 2000s and early 2010s pretty much required a movie tie-in game to go along with it. Radical Entertainment, known for releasing the iconic 2003 Simpsons Hit and Run and later 2009's Prototype, started work on the PS3 and Xbox 360 version of Spider-Man 4. With all the Sony money, the hype of another Sam Raimi movie, and the development already started on a movie tie-in game in 2009, this makes me wonder, what the hell happened to Spider-Man 4 the game? Before we get started, I need to talk about this one item I've been using for roughly a month now, and I've noticed a huge improvement in the quality of sleep. Manta Sleep, today's sponsor of the video, provided me their Pro and Silk versions of their masks. The masks are really good quality, they work really well for people like me who sleep on their side, and what is crazy is that you don't even have to bother pulling the curtains, as Manta Sleep's masks are able to completely block out any light that could reduce your quality of sleep. Check out Manta Sleep in the description if you want to feel much better in the morning, and if you want to save some money while supporting the channel, be sure to use code FO for 10% off. Before that though, we need to look at everything that we know, such as the developers, story, and what the gameplay would be. Before Spider-Man 4, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 movie tie-in games were developed by Treyarch. What's interesting though, is when Activision first bought Treyarch were handed the task of porting Neversoft's Spider-Man game to the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2, but during development of the PS2 version, the team would take the opportunity of the hype of the upcoming Spider-Man movie and made a movie tie-in game instead. Spider-Man 1 was Treyarch's first attempt at their own Spider-Man game. Yes, the swing mechanics were pretty basic, the game was pretty linear, but it still does look great for a game from the early 2000s. It received great reviews with 79 out of 100 on Metacritic, with the movie receiving a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Spider-Man 2 was a huge step up from the previous game. Although I didn't personally enjoy the missions, the second game offered an explorable open world where Spider-Man could traverse New York, and to make it even better, with much more realistic webbing where Spider-Man's web needed to attach to buildings to swing off of. This required a bit of practice and skill to get a hang of, but was definitely worth it and so satisfying to swing through New York once you got comfortable. Critics and fans would give it a positive review with a rating of 85 and considered it one of the best superhero games at that time. Spider-Man 2 the movie would do insanely well, being considered one of the greatest superhero movies of all time and getting a rating of 93 on Rotten Tomatoes. Sadly, this wasn't all smooth sailing, as this is where the ugly duckling of the trilogy would appear for the movie and the video game, Spider-Man 3. Although fans have grown to love Spider-Man 3 the movie, with all its flaws, it still has some great moments and has produced some of the best memes you can imagine. Although the video game had some funny moments, Spider-Man 3 was a huge step down from the previous game, with its terrible QuickTime events, ugly in most cutscenes, and pretty terrible performance-wise. You would think when the opportunity came along for Treyarch to develop Spider-Man 4 it would be a given, but there was just one problem. A year after the release of Spider-Man 3, Treyarch would go on to release a World War II game named Call of Duty World at War, which gave players a grim reality of what soldiers went through during World War II. There were scenes of torture, war crimes, and the introduction to one of the biggest modes created in the franchise, Nazi zombies. Activision saw the potential of Treyarch as purely a Call of Duty developer, or probably what was more likely, the money they could make over a Spider-Man movie game, but that left Activision with one question: who would make the Spider-Man 4 movie game? Activision would need to call up an internal team that had experience in developing a successful open world superhero video game that was also set in New York, a team that could basically build off what they already had in order to meet a short deadline. This is one of the main reasons they went with Canadian studio Radical Entertainment, the developers at the time of the popular video game Prototype, which released in 2009. The story followed Alex Macer, a shapeshifter who sets out to stop an outbreak of a virus called Blacklight in Manhattan. Yes, the gameplay was based off of Radical Entertainment's 2005 release, The Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, but it's still possible that Radical's Hulk game was inspired by Spider-Man 2, which released a year before. The first thing that I thought of when playing Prototype's open world was that it basically is Spider-Man just without the web swinging, so Radical seemed like the perfect choice. What could have been the story of Spider-Man 4 the video game though? Well, let's take a look at Spider-Man 4 the film, which would have focused on the Vulture, who apparently was going to be in Spider-Man 3 instead of Venom, until the studio interfered. John Malkovich was set to play the main villain Vulture, with Dr. Kirk Connors, who we've seen in the previous films, eventually would turn into the creature we know as the Lizard. Multiple smaller villains that Raimi felt he wanted to feature but weren't good enough to make a proper appearance would have made a brief cameo in a montage. Shocker, Rhino, Stiltman, and funnily enough, Bruce Campbell as Mysterio, which would have been a nod to how this one random character featured in every previous Spider-Man movie. In a slight change to lore, apparently Anne Hathaway's Felicia Hardy was going to be revealed as Vulture's daughter, and after Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man would accidentally kill Vulture, with Felicia spectating the fight, this would motivate her to seek revenge by becoming the Vultress. The game's story would have probably followed a similar structure like most movie tie-in games, with all the big scenes included, such as the boss fight against Vulture and Felicia Hardy's Vultress, but would have been padded out, like how Vulture featured in Spider-Man 1 and Shocker featured in Spider-Man 2 for a boss fight, even though these characters never featured in the movies. We only know a couple of enemy factions that were going to be in the game. They were titled Red Devils and Hell's Angels that were mentioned in a cutscene.
Now that's strange. These masks remind me of something.
You mean one of these masks?
Let me see that.
What are you guys looking at?
There's something about this mask that... Hold on, wait. That reminds me of this. The Red Devils.
Red Devils?
Red Devils MC, old school motorcycle gang. They lost a big turf war with the Hells Angels back in the 70s. They used to have a clubhouse up in Harlem, but I don't know if it's still there.
We can see that the Red Devils could potentially have been in the Wii version of Spider-Man 4 developed by Eurocom, which looks like the gang mentioned in the cutscene. In the Xbox 360 version of the game, there was even a sequence where Spider-Man needs to stop thugs that were trying to capture a blimp airship, and ends with Spider-Man having to save the hostages on board. So what the hell happened to Spider-Man 4 the movie tie-in game? It looked pretty good, great developer behind the game, it had a solid foundation, and the hype of a fourth Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. Well, you probably knew this already, but the movie was cancelled. Spider-Man 4 didn't get past the storyboard or script, with Sam Raimi, the director, rejecting multiple potential storylines, probably due to the stress of the poorly received Spider-Man 3, leaving Raimi with a lot of pressure of having to redeem himself. The studio was also putting pressure on Raimi, with Sony looking to have Spider-Man 4 and 5 filmed back to back to speed up the process, as actors Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst were really growing out of that role at that point. Sony also weren't that interested in continuing Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, with apparently shifting focus to getting a younger actor that they could pay less, with Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man, who they could pay much less than Tobey, as Andrew Garfield was a much smaller actor at that point. Sam Raimi realised this and decided it was best to walk away, cancelling all hope to know what a post-Spider-Man 3 story would look like, until we got a glimpse at an older, more experienced Tobey Maguire, who returned for 2021's Spider-Man No Way Home, which released 14 years after Tobey's final movie. Did Spider-Man 4 the video game go completely to waste? Well, actually no, as Radical Entertainment would repurpose these assets and gameplay mechanics for their next game, Prototype 2, which released a year after Spider-Man 4 was planned to be. It worked out pretty well for Radical, as Prototype 2 would also be set in New York City, and although the builds that we have for Spider-Man 4 are super early on, we can see that the map wasn't really detailed, but at least gave the developers a good starting point to work off of. Prototype 2 wouldn't include Spider-Man's web swinging, but it would include the same animations used for wall running and leaping from buildings, although these were pretty much the same as the original prototype. Prototype 2 would go on to receive high scoring reviews, with many saying that it had a lot of quality of life improvements over the first game. The game improved on the combat with new tendril powers, although some fans felt that it made the combat feel way too easy. The game also looked much better with better graphics, and the sequel was much more vibrant, probably due to how they wanted New York to look much brighter for Spider-Man 4, which was then repurposed to save time and money. Although a pretty great sequel, the issue was that it wasn't a commercial success, leading to Prototype 3 to be cancelled during its development, because we all know Activision at the time were a money-making machine with the help of ex-Spider-Man developers Treyarch, pumping out Call of Duties in a yearly cycle, so anything creative that may have not made the money that Activision expected would then have no chance of getting a sequel project. Sadly, Spider-Man 4 would never make it to its release, although 2 builds of the Xbox 360 game would release from October and November of 2009, which you can play today, although it does have multiple issues such as graphical, rough cuts or placeholder cutscenes, and most of the time you'll end up clipping through the floor. Spider-Man 4 shows how brutal the superhero movie and game genre can be. On the movie side, Sony had plans to reboot Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, while Sam Raimi was actively working on a 4th movie, as Sony would just hope he would walk away from the project. On the game side, Radical Entertainment didn't do anything wrong. They seem to be working well and introduced some new ideas to the table for Spider-Man, but sadly when the film your game is based on gets cancelled, then the studio does not have much choice. Although a sad end for Spider-Man 4, it seemed to have worked out for Radical at least, as they got to salvage some parts in order to make Prototype 2, rather than in most cases the project gets silently cancelled, never to see the light of day. Comment down below if you would have loved to have had Spider-Man 4 the movie and game to release. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check out these videos suggested. That's all for now. My name is Fo, and Slan.